Hello and welcome to podcast.init, the podcast about Python and the people who make it great. I would like to thank everyone who supports the show on Patreon. Your contributions help to make the show sustainable. When you're ready to launch your next project, you'll need somewhere to deploy it, so you should check out Linode at podcastinit.com/Linode and get a $20 credit to try out their fast and reliable Linux virtual servers for running your app. And now you can deliver your work to your users even faster with the newly upgraded 200 gigabit network in all of their data centers. If you're tired of cobbling together your deployment pipeline, then it's time to try out GoCD, the open source continuous delivery platform built by the people at ThoughtWorks who wrote the book about it. With GoCD, you get complete visibility into the life cycle of your software from one location. To download it now, go to podcastinit.com/GoCD. Professional support and enterprise plugins are available for added peace of mind. You can visit the site at podcastinit.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the newsletter, and read the show notes. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, I would love to hear them. You can reach me on Twitter at podcastinit or email me at hosts@podcastinit.com. To help other people find the show, please leave a review on iTunes or Google Play Music, tell your friends and coworkers, and share it on social media. Your host as usual is Tobias Macey, and today I'm interviewing Blaž Zupan and Janez Demšar about Orange, a toolbox for interactive machine learning and data visualization in Python. Janez, could you start by introducing yourself?
I'm Janez Demšar. I'm professor at University of Ljubljana. I started with AI and machine learning. Now I'm mostly working with students in first year, teach them basic programming in Python, and with children. So that's my second hobby. I'm teaching children about computational thinking, programming, using microcontrollers, stuff like this.
And Blaž, how about you?
Yeah, I'm also with University of Ljubljana and also with Baylor College of Medicine. I do data mining and machine learning, and I also teach here at university, but also we make a lot of courses for people outside universities, like in companies and high schools and so on. So we like to teach. I'm lately all on Orange, so I completely spent all my time on Orange development and everything around it.
And Janez, do you remember how you first got introduced to Python?
Yeah, it was actually related to Orange. Orange at that time was a collection of C++ classes. I started writing them as a student, I guess, and nobody could use them. There was no documentation, so it was just a library of C++ classes. And so I packed them into kind of command line utilities, which had larger and larger number of options. You may think that FFmpeg is a complicated program, but Orange had really complicated command lines, and at a certain point, we, together with Blaž, we decided we have to invent a language in which you could program processes in machine learning. And so somebody told me about Python, and I admired it as a glue language, essentially. So it was way before NumPy and before Cython. So if you wanted to do something quick in Python, you had to write the slow part in C++. There was no way around it at that time, I guess. So I used Python mostly as a glue language. I didn't appreciate how nice the language is by itself. So that was my first introduction to Python.
And Blaž, do you remember how you got introduced to Python?
There would be a simple question. Janez pushed me, but a more complicated question. I think we were actually visiting Baylor College in Houston, and we actually there was a bookstore just close to our hotel, and we went there and we bought 2 books on Python on Friday, and then we were thinking what to do with it, and Janez started to program, and actually he made a interface from his C++ machine learning routines in Python, and I think this was the start, and it was somewhere around 98 or 99 if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and the story is interesting because we bought 2 out of 3 books they had about Python. They had just 3. And I guess this was Barnes & Noble, a huge bookstore. They had just 3 books about Python at that time. Now compare it to what you have today.
Yeah, there's definitely quite the catalog of books about Python at this point, spanning every discipline that you could imagine. And you mentioned briefly that Orange has had a very long history, but I'm wondering if you can just take some time to describe what the project is and what was your motivation for building it.
So I still need to dig into a bit of history. I think in 1997, I met Donald Mickey, and he visited the institute I was employed in. Donald Mickey is one of the like founders of artificial intelligence, and we talked about how it would be great to have something for machine learning like what R does, but it should be on a web, it should have fancy interface, it should have visualization. And then Donald Mickey and myself and Nadal Arash, we organized a meeting in Bled, which is, by the way, a beautiful resort in Slovenia, a lake resort. And there were some really great names coming, like Ross Quinlan and Tom Mitchell. So both of them founders of machine learning. And it was interesting so the meeting was about building a tool for machine learning. That was in 1997. Also invited was IBM, because we thought that Java would be the program. And then it was interesting and nothing came out of the meeting. So I think the error was that only the seniors were there, and Janez and myself were the only juniors, actually. And then Janez walked into my office 2 weeks later, and he said, well, we should just do it, right? And this is how it started. So the motivation was actually to have, at that time, a library, so like a Swiss knife for machine learning. And we haven't thought about interface, we haven't thought about visualization, just plain simple library that would be very simple to use.
And given how long the project has been around for, what have been some of the challenges of evolving it as new technologies and new machine learning techniques have evolved and been introduced?
So at a certain point, we stopped developing our own algorithms and implementing them. Instead, we just used what's in Scikit and other libraries, and we concentrated more on visualization aspects. So we want to have algorithms that can give you a nice visualizations of patterns in your data. So that's what changed. Also, we don't go much into like deep neural networks and those methods that cannot give you any real insight in your data. They can give you just predictions. They're good for some things, of course. They're what moves AI now, but we're not really in this business a lot.
And who is the target audience for Orange?
Yeah, at the beginning, actually, the target audience were researchers in machine learning, because we were, researchers, and actually not just researchers, but educators, because we also taught, we still teach machine learning and data science. And we assumed that the audience enjoyed programming and would learn Python and Orange easily, right? But then actually in around 2000, we worked with medical doctors and mined data from clinical medicine. And we noticed there was little excitement. If I would have a physician and I would say, wow, my classification accuracy is 0.7, or my area under ROC curve is cross-validated 0.9, right? There will be no excitement about that. Even if we show them how the classification trees or coefficients in logistic regression look like, there will be no excitement at all. And then we figured out at that time what they really wanted to see is they would like to visualize the data. They would like to talk with us, but through visualization of data, models, interactions. For instance, in 2000, there was no tool that you could show a classification tree and then they would say, show me the particular branch. What are the patients that are in this particular branch, right? You would need to go into program and you would need to script. And this is not what we wanted. And we actually figured out that visual interactions are so more powerful. That means visualizations, and then not only visualizations of the data, but something that you can browse and touch and select and then mine further. And that goes actually back in 1993. I had a class in high performance computing with a tool called Data Explorer, IBM tools. Something similar was also by Silicon Graphics, and it used visual programming. Visual programming was like you could design the workflow, how you would analyze an image and how you would actually construct an image and then change the parameters easily and so on. This was fantastic. In 1993, this tool existed. That doesn't exist anymore. And then in 2003, we said, okay, that's the proper way to address it. So we need a visual programming framework where you construct data analysis workflows very easily just by putting the blocks together. We call them widgets. And we need a heavy visualization. Heavy means that everything needs to be visualized, not only data, but the models. And we need interaction. So in any kind of visualization, you can touch any element and then you can find out what particular data is actually associated with that. So that means, right, that our audience changed from machine learning researchers and teachers and university students to just about anybody that has data.
And you mentioned that there's a strong focus on the graphical capabilities of Orange. So I'm wondering how that interface is implemented and the kinds of workflows that can be built with the different components and widgets that you have in the library.
So technically, we use PyQt, which is a great great tool for making GUIs. And what the user can do, he can put components of this workflow, like I'm reading the data, I'm showing a data table, I'm showing a scatter plot. Now, the data points I select in the scatter plot should go into, clustering. I'm going to use k-means with such and such parameters to choose the optimal k, and the clustering we have should go into those and those widgets. So the user can compose a schema like this, which is essentially programming, except that you don't write any code like textual code. So it's much easier for new users who don't know any programming, and also who may not know much about data analysis, because it's so intuitive. It's like a child playing with Lego bricks, just putting stuff together, and the user sees what works and what doesn't. So that's the way you use Orange.
So what are some of the most notable or interesting widgets and capabilities that you have in the current incarnation of the catalog for the project?
Although there are many, and some of them are some of them are fancy in interactions like clustering and Disney and so on. I really like a very simple one, and this is called the paint data widget. It's a widget where I can paint the data. I can take a brush or a pen, and I can paint two-dimensional data, and that works beautifully when we teach machine learning. So I can paint the data to show that linear regression with polynomial expansion over fits. I can paint the data for clustering. I can show what is like the regularization. I can show actually how to trick k-means such that it doesn't guess the right clusters, or maybe that it does, right? So I like that widget a lot, but it really shines in combination with the other ones, right? So I would have several windows open in one. I would paint the data in the other one. I would show the results of the clustering, and that would all happen instantaneously. Yeah, so I have another one. I thought that Janez is gonna mention nomograms or something here. Janez.
I don't have a favorite widget, so I cannot. So my view of widgets is so different. I implemented lots of them. So my favorite widgets are those with the nicest code, and users don't see it, but that's what drives me.
So we have a different driver with Janez. He's more on the code side, and I'm on a presentation layer actually, which is great. Working with somebody that's not completely a clone of yourself is really complementary and great. So maybe I mention another one. Can I?
Sure.
Yeah, so lately we are playing with image analytics, and this is one that I enjoy a lot because it's so simple. So the idea is that there's a reader for images. So you have images in some folder on your desktop or wherever. You load the images, and there's another widget called Image Embedder. So that pushes the images through the deep neural network. And then each image is described with a vector, so the penultimate layer of the neural network. And then you can do things like classification or clustering. So you can cluster the images. And then there's another widget called Image Viewer. So you would actually go from reading the images, embedding them in a vector space, clustering them, and then you can type on the branches of the cluster, and then you see which images are similar to each other. And that works really great. So thanks for the developments in deep learning, of course.
And Janez, are there any widgets that you're particularly proud of the implementation that you'd like to call out?
So what I like is in PyQt, you have this model view paradigm. And I think that our widgets, at least the new ones and those that we renovate with the factor, really make use of this paradigm a lot. we implemented a layer on top of Qt, which helps us develop widgets quickly. So we don't just add Qt components like you would do it usually. We call a function which adds the component, but then also synchronizes what's in the component, like a combo box. It's synchronized with an attribute in a certain Python class that represents the widget. So in this way, we have very little overhead to maintain the user interface. So widgets can be really small because of this extra layer. So those widgets that I really like are the new widgets that use this model view paradigm, and they can be much easier to maintain. We can add new features quite quickly in this way.
Janez is also kind of often very modest about the framework that he has helped to create. So what I would like to expose, if you write a new widget meaning that there's a component that gets, let's say, some data and does something like build a neural network and then output something, in this case, the classifier. It's very simple to build it. So Orange comes with the library for development comes with the library of different controls that you can use. And these controls you can set such that they would initialize, so that they would set themselves based on the data on the input, right? So every time the data would change to that widget, the widget would know what was the latest setting with a particular data set. So I think this is a really nice piece of code that is digged into Orange, but it helps you to actually define the user interfaces in a very simple way, and such that everything works nicely, so that the settings are data dependent, that Orange, when you save the workflow, saves these settings. When you open the workflow, the settings are back again. So it helps a lot to reproducibilities of the data analysis, right? Every data analysis, any workflow that you store is going to behave exactly the same way when you open it again.
So essentially, if you have a new machine learning algorithm that you implemented, or a new visualization method, whatever, if you have it in Python or in C++ and you call it through some interface, it's really easy to add a new widget to Orange. So anybody can just add a new add-on package to PyPy, pack his methods in like maybe 10 or 20 lines of code. You can add a new widget with your method and push it as an add-on to Orange.
And for the data interchange between the different stages of the visual flow, how do you manage sending the data from the outputs of one step to the inputs of the other in a way that is as efficient as possible?
So each widget declares what are its outputs. So it's a name of an output and a type, and other widgets declare inputs. And so there's a piece of Orange called Signal Manager. If you connect two widgets, they're just going to send the data object from one widget to another. Most of data types, so most signals are just NumPy tables, NumPy arrays. So it doesn't involve any overhead. So all processing that happens, if widget needs to do something with a table or construct a new table, it's in the widget. But this communication is really nothing, no processing, no memory gets consumed there.
It's nice because this decouples the complexity of data analysis. So when you develop Orange, you don't develop Orange. You're actually thinking only about the widget, right? You're thinking, okay, what is this component going to work on, and what's going to output, and how it's going to present the information from the input, like in any kind of visualization. So you can develop a widget completely independently of everything else. And then for me, still it's shocking when I use Orange. It's shocking about all the possible combinations where I can use something that was developed maybe half a year ago, and then the combination would be completely new, right? I would use something in a completely different way than it was supposed to. Like, for instance, we build a silhouette widget for trying to score data instances on how well do they fit a particular cluster, right? And then we found out that this widget is actually excellent to find the outliers.
And when you're working with a visual language that is an abstraction of a textual-oriented language that's fully Turing complete, there are often going to be cases where you bump up against the limitations of what can be represented in the widget. So I'm wondering, what are those limitations that are present in the graphical interface, and what options do users have when they reach those limits in order to be able to take work that they're doing and extend it beyond what they can do within Orange?
Yeah, there's a separation. What you can do in visual languages like Orange, like workflows, and what you can do in the code. So one thing that we don't have, and probably never will have, is loops. Any loop that happens in the widget. We don't have loops in the workflows. We have been exploring this a lot, and people are asking for it, but it just doesn't fit our paradigm. Of course, you have languages with loops. For children, you have Scratch, which includes loops, of course. But in this workflow paradigm, we just cannot make it work. There's no obvious way to do it. So we try to avoid making things incomprehensible by just adding loops. And also, we don't need it. So when the user needs to do something really complicated, he has to go to code. Eventually, when the analysis becomes too complex, you have to do some coding.
There was a design decision in Orange not to have too many widgets. So widgets, again, are components that process the data information. And the idea was not to have too many of them, right? So if you would have loops, then you would have to have some data pre-processing, post-processing and everything. So we do not have that. We do not have a widget that changes a string to something else, because that would be too low, right? So we rather have as few widgets as possible, but there's a threshold, right? So it should not be too complex again, right? So the complexity meaning that it would have too many options, it would do too many different things, right? So we try to leverage this complexity on one side and the number of different widgets on the other side. The problem with too many widgets would be that users wouldn't know actually what to use. If you have a library of thousands of widgets, that adds a complexity layer that we would like to avoid.
So I have seen tools that are kind of similar to Orange, but in which signals could also be not just whole data tables, but single integers or strings. And it became more or less like your coding. So it was too low level to be useful for ordinary users. So we try to stay above this. And if you want to, say, widgets to communicate with low-level data, we're just not supporting it. It's not our game.
And you've mentioned a bit about some of the underlying libraries that you use to build Orange itself and the widget catalog. I'm wondering if you can spend some more time talking about how widget is implemented at a low level and how that implementation has changed over the different versions that you've released.
Okay, so we started, I think we had the very first version was in TKTK, but we stopped using it quite soon. It just didn't look nice. So we decided early on to use PyQt, and we are still quite happy with it. The real problem is with visualization libraries like scatter plots and box plot and stuff like this. We haven't found any good tools for this. So matplotlib is great, but it doesnt play well with Qt and with interactivity. You just cannot really interact with it. So currently we use PyQt graph. We're not too happy with it. We're going for some JavaScript embedding into widgets. We just cannot find anything that plays well with PyQt. So that's a big problem we have. Otherwise, we are relying on NumPy, SciPy, scikit-learn for machine learning stuff. So these are the two big groups of libraries. One is for visualization and the other is for machine learning. Otherwise, we have like dozens of different small libraries also included.
And for people who are just getting started with doing data analysis and machine learning, there are a lot of concepts to be able to tackle and understand. So I'm wondering, what are some of the most common difficulties that you've seen when those users are first getting started in that area? And how does Orange help to overcome those gaps in understanding?
So I think there are three approaches to learn about machine learning. One goes through mathematics, which is obviously okay if you're good in mathematics. The other can be through programming, Again, you need to be computer science major for this. And the other is more intuitive. You learn through observing things, through, as Blaž said, painting some data and seeing how clustering works there and which machine learning method works there. So if you take this route, for instance, you're not computer science or mathematics major, you're coming from, I don't know, biology, then Orange would help you to learn about data mining in more intuitive, human-friendly way.
I think for me, the challenge is, suppose, so you go, you say you're in Boston, right? Suppose you go on the street in Boston and pick up 3 random people, right? You stop 3 random people and say, and you have 1 hour to teach them what machine learning is. And for me, the challenge is that, can I have a tool actually where within 1 hour, I would show them what machine learning is, such that when they go home, they can do it on their own, right? And this is some of the things that we do in Orange is just for supporting this kind of training. Maybe not in 1 hour. So we recently are having a lot of hands-on workshops that take 1 day, right? And in 1 day, I think you can teach people what is machine learning, what is classification, what is clustering, what is the problem with overfitting. We even go into regularization, right? And Orange is really a tool where you can do that. You can actually train people within a day or maybe 2, such that they become aware of what is possible to do. I'm not saying that they become data scientists, because for data scientists, you need years of practice, right? But I'm talking about informing people what is machine learning, because in current society, only a few, like a tiny little percentage of people actually know what machine learning is. And on the other side, we know that machine learning is all around us, and all the big and small companies are using that. So Orange is really about democratization of data science. Can we support just about everybody with tools that they can use to play with the data?
And there's also the case where you have people who are working in the area professionally, but they don't necessarily want to break out the big guns to work through just a, proof of concept. They just want to be able to throw some data up, run it through a few different steps and see what the outcome is. And it seems that Orange is a good way to facilitate that experimentation and data exploration without having to invest a lot of upfront in terms of setting up the boilerplate for being able to load the data, process it through different steps, and then export that through a visualization tool.
Yeah, it's like smoothing the learning curve, right? I mean, think about Excel, how people accept this as a tool that virtually anyone can use. And Excel is now used in primary schools and secondary schools, and everybody knows about it, right? And we probably do not have such a tool for machine learning, right? Where I think Orange and similar products are actually just ripe, right? To go to primary school and think about what data science is.
And also, as you said, even if you know how to handle big guns and you just want to take a peek at your data before you start using big guns, you can just open Orange and take a look. So it's really useful for this too.
And there is also this element of interaction, right? So you cannot do data interaction with Matplotlib or Python, right? It's this element where you talk with a customer or with a colleague or with the data owner. It becomes so much fun to actually be able to touch the data.
And what are some of the most interesting or innovative uses of Orange that you've seen?
So we are working with a group of physicists and chemists who run some large synchrotrons. These are like huge microscopes, essentially. They use radiation that comes from accelerators. And one of those groups, they took Orange, threw all widgets away, and composed a new set of widgets that they use for simulating optics that happens in these huge microscopes that they use. So data there are not data from like machine learning, from data mining, data there. So each data point is a photon, and they're trying to simulate what lenses would do with a beam of photons in the accelerators.
So Janez just mentioned an example where Orange was not used as intended, right? It was not a data science workflow tool, but for something else, right?
Yeah, they took the infrastructure that we have, that is the canvas, the part of Orange that allows you to put widgets onto the schema and connect them. They took this part, but they replaced everything else.
There are also other projects that use Orange in a more common way. So I'm just looking here. The Textable IO is like is an add-on for text analysis and for digital humanities. So there's a group of people developing their own widgets. They interact with our widgets, but they also are more towards text analysis. And maybe an anecdote, which is not exactly so on production of widgets, but on the use, right? So I remember I was explaining image analysis to my colleague in Houston, Gacholski, that he had some images for molecular biologies. And so the test there was classification of different development stages of a certain amoeba. And then, then we quit the conversation, and I don't know. After 8 hours, Gadi calls me back. He says, "Oh, I just went home and I took the photos from my family photo album and I clustered them, right?" And then he described how there are some images where he appears with his wife and with his children, and in the mountains and without. And it was such a great experience, right? So going from just showing somebody how to do image analysis, right? 8 hours later, right, he does mining of his photo album.
Yeah, it's definitely cool seeing the different ways that people will use the tools and technologies that we produce, often in ways that we don't necessarily expect. And one of the other things that is worth noting about Orange that I don't think we talked about yet is the fact that it has some widgets built in for being able to serve as data sources, so that if you don't already have an existing data set that you want to work with, but you want to experiment with some of these different techniques, you have the ability to just plug into an existing stream of data. So for instance, Twitter or some of the other capabilities that you have for bringing data into the tool for doing some different types of analyses.
Yeah, lately this is actually where we are going, right? So we are also working with some companies that have completely different, environments, and some databases that where you build a widget actually to actually access the data, and then you build some widgets to visualize them in their own way, right? There are widgets. Like for PubMed browsing, and there are widgets for that can gather tweets, and there are widgets that can gather Facebook contacts and so on, right? There's such a wealth of things that you can still do. So of course, we as a group, right, we wouldn't like to do everything, and we would just like to set the environment where people can do that and then enjoy on everything else, right? So if you build a widget that can read all the Shakespeare books, of course, there are widgets then can cluster the text, that can analyze them, that can visualize the differences and so on. So you have this data, you have this component-rich environment where just adding one more widget enables the use of Orange in completely some new field, right? Economics or digital humanities or physics or molecular biology, whatever.
So what are some of the other projects or technologies that you consider to be either competition with Orange or alternative options for people who are interested in the capabilities that Orange has?
So maybe first, rather than competition, we of course gain a lot from everything that is developed in Python, right? So because Orange is based on Python, whatever libraries that are new, whatever deep learning that comes out there, it's great for Orange because we can include it or we learn from that. There are also similar projects in other languages, like probably most notable currently are RapidMiner and KNIME. I should say that both of these are actually companies. So we are not. We are still a group at university, right? But I wouldn't say that they're a competition. They're doing something different. So let's say RapidMiner is more on building the workflows that can run on servers, right? And then you get after after you design the data, then there is a final report, right? And Orange is not about that. Orange is not about creating a report with a known workflow. Rather, what we really specialize in is like data visualization and interaction, right? So you basically work with the data like you would tell a story, right? You start, you visualize the data, you select, you tell why this is interesting, you mine further. So Origin is different in that respect. And I think KNIME is somewhere in between Rapid Miner and Orange in the focus, right? But what we really especially like about Orange is this interactivity. And that takes a lot of development work. So the widget that shows just a scatter plot, right, it would be very simple to do, right? But the widget where you can select different things in scatter plot, and then you have all the modifier keys that you can not only select one group, but then you can define clusters, and that outputs this kind of cluster that you can analyze further. That's much more work, right? Even for a simple thing like scatter plot, but then consider dendrograms, trees, graphs, networks. All of them have to be interactive, and this is the specialty where I think where we have a niche.
And under what circumstances would you advise against using Orange?
If your focus is not data visualization and interaction, then maybe. So if you would like to have a really good prediction accuracy, and when you have large data sets that don't fit into memory, you'd like to use cloud computing, then you cannot use Orange for that. So if you're just into making lots of predictions quickly, that's not Orange. Orange is about, as Blaž said, it's a storytelling tool. You let the data tell a story. So in this case, you would use Orange. If you just like to squeeze your data, then it's not Orange.
And you've mentioned a lot of the different types of widgets that you have currently. I'm wondering, what are some of the ones that you would like to see in future versions, or ones that you would like to see contributed as additional plugins for Orange?
We are now working in some specialized fields, like we are building Orange for single-cell genomics. Since single-cell genomics is like the almost like a brand new field that it's just popping up, and the data there is very interesting and needs integration with other libraries in molecular genomics. So this is a part of what our group is working on. We're of course working on towards some new data visualizations widget, and we would also like to find means of how to explain the results of deep learning. So widgets that use deep learning, but that have the explanation power, right? If I say that I don't know, there's an image, right, and on that image there's it's an image from, let's say, clinical medicine, and there's a certain disease in that image. I would like to point out what particular part of image is responsible for that, and I would like to do that interactively so that I can explore further what's happening. So, but beyond widgets, right, I think what we're working on is now we would like to create dashboards. So Orange is, in Orange you visually design the workflows, but then you would like to select some of the typical visualizations and maybe settings of particular methods like clustering, right? And you would like to organize them in the dashboard with a constraint that the dashboard should be just as interactive as everything else is in Orange. And so I think it's going to take us a few more months to turn Orange into a dashboard creator.
And the widgets I'm interested in are education. So we have an education add-on with widgets intended to teach about data mining. We use it in lectures, in hands-on courses we give. I'd really like to expand this part because I think we can be really good at this. There are just a few widgets there. And the other part is Internet of Things. So I'm playing with microcontrollers, and I don't think we have any widgets that can pull data from there. But this would be really interesting if we can add widgets for analyzing data that comes continuously from small microcontrollers that you put around with sensors, stuff like this.
We are also working on widgets that use deep learning. So the idea is not to use Orange for deep learning, because usually deep learning takes a lot of data and time. You don't do that in Orange. But once you build a model, you can use something called transfer learning, right? So you can, let's say, you can learn embedders from millions of images, but then you only have a small set of images that you would like to analyze. And this is what we would like Orange to do. We would allow people to read these images and then put them through embedders and then analyze them and probably explain what is on each image. So something like the analysis for smaller data sets, but using already trained deep models, and deep models for images and text and graph structures and also, for instance, chemical structures.
And beyond just the widgets, what are some of the other features that you have planned for future releases?
So as I said, dashboards. So dashboard is where we're gonna go next.
And is there any particular help or certain areas that you would like contributions from people who are using Orange, and you'd like to have some feedback or contributions in terms of code or documentation or other types of input?
I think Python community is doing great. So many things are developed there that anything you want, somebody is working on it. So we're really happy with our choice of language. And I don't think we could have any specific wishes that are not being fulfilled right now already.
There's also help coming from community. So every time somebody installs Orange, so Orange comes for free. You don't need to leave email, but you can actually answer survey questions. And we're learning a lot from people that enter this survey. So there are now two. One is a short one that you can answer in 1 minute, and one is a longer one where people actually can put some thoughts into. And it's great to see that every week, right? We have somebody in the lab that summarizes all the surveys, and it's great to look at that and what people would like to have. Of course, we're just like a small group of about 10 to 20 developers. We cannot fulfill everything. And currently we are contacted by a number of companies that actually would like to extend Orange in particular ways, let's say for healthcare or for financial markets and this is great because it's going to actually propel Orange through domains that we as a single group, right, we cannot address because of the lack of domain knowledge and of course lack of time. But essentially what we are doing is building a tool that the others can either use or can develop their own widgets for their own liking.
Are there any other topics that we didn't cover yet that you think we should talk about before we start to close out the show?
In the past year, I've been enjoying also working with Ida Pretner. She's actually an anthropologist. She's not a computer science. She's an anthropologist, joined my lab about 2 years ago, and the plan was actually to make YouTube videos that relate to Orange and that introduced anybody to data science. And this has been great fun. And so the videos are picked up. I think there have been almost 500,000 views already. The videos are short, about 3 minutes each. And we keep adding them in the rate of 1 per month. And that has been great. Also, it helps the group sometimes to focus on something that is new that we would like to present in Orange. And then we kind of polish this up. So it's like an artificial deadline for the group as well.
And one last question is, where does the name come from?
So we always get this question at some stage. So the initial name that when we were conceiving the machine learning library with Janez was ML star, like a closure on machine learning, right? So any number of components that you would combine, right? And this is very hard. So what is that? ML star, right? Should be, how do you write this, right? It should be MLS or something. And then I went to my wife and asked, well, we have this funny name which is very geekish, right? I mean, now that I think back, maybe we should keep with that one. But then she said, okay, how about blue? And I said, no, blue is melancholic, right? And then she said, let's call it Orange.
And looking deeper into that a little bit, it seems like it's a little bit serendipitous because a lot of the work that you're doing with machine learning is comparisons, and sometimes you're trying to compare apples and oranges. So it has another layer there too.
Yeah. So this, of course, it's, when you choose a name, I think the rule is never to choose a name from any color of fruit, right? And we picked both, which is, there were, I don't know, I think 5 years we gathered 20 of us together, and we say, okay, maybe we should change it. And then we we discussed this for a week, right? What are all the derivatives of orange that we could use? I think now it's so, there are so many pages, so many web pages, and so many references to orange data mining that we probably cannot go and change it anymore. So it's going to stay like this for future.
All right. Well, for anybody who wants to follow the work that either of you are up to and keep in touch, I'll have you add your preferred contact information to the show notes. And with that, I'll move us into the picks. And for my pick this week, I'm going to choose an episode of the Data Stories podcast, where they spoke to a couple of people from the New York Times Learning Lab about a project that they're working on called What's Going On in This Graph, where they take different data visualizations and graphs from past episodes of the New York Times, strip out a lot of the context, and then post it on the Learning Network so that students and teachers can try to ask and answer some questions about what the purpose of the graph is, what's the context around it, and then after about a week or so, they will also post the actual story that it was originally embedded into, and they have moderators facilitating the discussions. So it seems like a really interesting project and something that it looks like it would be a lot of fun for students and educators to get involved with. And so with that, I'll pass it to you, Blaž. Do you have any picks for us this week?
Yeah, I actually enjoy the podcast by NPR, How I Build This, with Guy Raz. So I cannot name a particular one, but every one that I listened to was great. So I really like that. It gives me energy. I listen to it usually when I'm in the car after work, and it's great to resetting my mind and listen how other people have struggled, and quite a number of them succeeded.
And Janez, do you have any picks for us?
Yeah, it's Advent of Code. It's something that happens every December. You get a new thing to program every day. It can take you 5 minutes, can take you 5 hours if the problem is more difficult. Usually it's just like a few minutes, but it's a nice task. I use those tasks also for students, and you can set your own challenges. So you can do it. One colleague did it. So you get 25 tasks. He decided to do it in 25 different languages. Last year, I decided to do everything on Arduino, which is a small microcontroller with 2 kilobytes of memory. This year, I decided to learn a new language. So I'm doing it in Kotlin, which is a really nice language. I shouldn't say that here, but sometimes some programs in Kotlin are even nicer than in Python. So Advent of Code is my pick.
All right. Well, I appreciate the both of you taking time out of your days to talk to me about the work you're doing with Orange. It's definitely a very interesting tool and one that I'm likely to start experimenting with and possibly even use to start teaching my children about data literacy and data science. So thank you for that, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your days.
Okay, thanks a lot for inviting us. It's been great. So I have to admit, I didn't know about your podcast until you invited us, but I listened to about 20 of them already, and they're all great. So you're doing great work. So thank you a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.